Alright, I am back with another build, and today we have the second of the kind of build requests that we built on my theory crafting livestream. We have got the Shadow Thrall. Now, what this character essentially is it's meant to be a powerful martial fighter that is able to take advantage of the Illithid Powers, which is something I don't really touch on in my videos very often, but since this was a request, I thought, okay, let's build something interesting around them and see what we can come up with. And I think we all came up with something really fun together. Now, the kind of backstory for this character, and I thought this was kind of interesting, is they are a Githyanki that was kidnapped from their creche, I think at a very young age, and placed on the Nautiloid that you see at the start of the game. But I think for years, the Mind Flayers were experimenting on this person, essentially trying out different combinations of their kind of tadpole generation, where they were kind of mixing and matching under the influence of, well, kind of spoilers, so I won't say it here, but play the game to find out. And as such, this Githyanki is harbouring a prototype kind of version of the special unique tadpoles that are present in the cast of Baldur's Gate 3. And because this Githyanki was experimented on for so long, their DNA has become somewhat altered, their skin colour has changed, their eyes have turned a deep pitch black with purple and, kind of grey hues, resembling that of a Mind Flayer, and have a very great control over their psychic abilities and the abilities that are usually present to Mind Flayers. The problem is that they constantly have to fight the urge to obey the desire of their masters, and also it kind of glitches out sometimes, making them want to kill people who are nearby without realizing. So yes, this is also a Dark Urge build as well. Now, a couple of things before we get into the video, into the build proper, just some quick things. Number one, as per the results of a poll that I did a little while ago, I am using visual mods for this. Now, the only visual mod that is present on this character is this hairstyle. Everything else that you see here can be done completely vanilla. All the mods I use in my videos will be linked in the description below. Second of all, well, I guess I kind of already covered it, but people are always asking me how I get all of my equipment at the very start of the game and they're already level 12. It's mods. Again, linked in the description. But with that out of the way, let's get into the build. So, we're going to be kicking things off as a monk. Now, you can choose to start fighting if you want for concentration saving throw or not concentration saving throw, but constitution saving throw proficiency, because that is going to be important to the build. However, we are going to be getting it a different way later on, so this is not necessary, and I'd much rather get all 3 feats here, because we're kind of feat heavy in this build. Not a lot, but a bit. So we're going to be going pretty much all the way monk for this one, and you'll see why as we get into it. If you know the game, you've probably already guessed. As for our ability scores, this is kind of how we're spread out. Dexterity is at 16 because it is our main attacking stat, so we want it pretty high. Constitution is at 16 to give us a bit more bulk, but also to help us with those constitution saving throws. Again, we want those are super important for this build, so I want this stat kind of as high as we can get it. And then finally, we have Wisdom at 14 because it is one of our more important stats. Basically for our unarmored defense, but it's not going to affect too many of our monk abilities in this case. However, we do still want it at a decent level, and I've just put intelligence and charisma at 10 just to have a decent all-around rounded stat, because again we are playing as a Githyanki, giving us astral knowledge, allowing us to gain proficiency in all skills of a chosen ability, meaning that if we have pretty much all of our skills at least neutral, we're going to get a lot of mileage out of this. And like I said, this is a Dark Urge build, so we have the Haunted One background for medicine and intimidation, but we can also pick up insight and stealth, which stealth is pretty important as a monk as well, so this is pretty good. And starting off as a Githyanki monk is going to give us a few other really interesting things, such as light and medium armor proficiency, simple weapons, short swords, long swords, and great swords weapon proficiencies. Short swords is very important here, as you can see, and as such, we get a lot of really good stuff to work with right off the bat. And if you're wondering if Dark Urge is optional for this build, kind of, but you're gonna lose a lot of really important stuff. You're gonna lose something really important to this build's playstyle. And honestly, this is a personal thing. I do think the Dark Urge is a bit more interesting as a storyline than just playing a custom Tav. But mainly, we need a certain piece of equipment. We'll get to that towards the end. Next up, at Monk level 2, we're going to be getting a few interesting things. Obviously, at this point, we're getting unarmored movement, allowing us to get be a bit faster while not wearing armor, and we're not wearing armor with this build, so that works just fine. We're also going to get patient defense, allowing us to inflict disadvantage on attack rolls against us, and we have advantage on dex saves. Pretty good. And we also have Step of the Wind, Dash, and Disengage, allowing us to do those things as a bonus action for the cost of a key point. At Monk level 3, we get to choose our subclass, and you probably already saw this one coming. We are going with Way of Shadow. The overall theme of kind of these shadows and the teleporting is really going to fit in nicely with a build like this, and again, we don't care too much about the spells because we mainly want to focus on using the Illithid Powers here, but especially in the earlier game, these are quite nice to have. We have the ability to now hide as a bonus action, which is awesome and is going to be important later, but we can also cast things like Passive Outtrace to give us a bonus to stealth, Darkness to be able to do some shenanigans there, Dark Vision exists, and Shadow Arts Silence to cast Silence as well, all for the cost of key points of varying degrees, which is, we kind of don't really want to use our key points on these things, but you'll see when we get into the actual gameplay loop later. We also have Minor Illusion as a cantrip, which is quite nice. I mean, getting a free cantrip is always nice, and Minor Illusion is a pretty good one and fits on theme, creating a little psychic illusion by messing with people's minds. This would also allow you to draw enemies away from crowds, allowing you to take out a single enemy quite easily. At Monk level 4, we are going to get some extra abilities, including Slowfall, allowing us to gain resistance to falling damage, which is nice, but we're also going to get a feat at this level. Now, you can take an ability score improvement here, bump up your dex, bump up your con, it's whatever you want to do, bump up your wisdom, if that's what you're feeling, and I would probably recommend doing this at this level, but at the moment, just so I don't forget to do it later, I'm going to quickly grab the feat War Caster. This is going to give us advantage on saving throws to maintain concentration on a spell. You can also use a reaction to cast Shocking Grasp at a target moving out of melee range. So it gives you a reaction attack, which is quite nice, but we absolutely want to get this advantage on concentration saving throws, and well, you'll see why when we get to the equipment, but you've probably already guessed it. But yeah, this is going to be super important. So you definitely want to pick this up at some point in your playthrough. I would say you probably want this to be your level 8 feat, because that's about when it's going to make sense to have it, because, when you get certain pieces of equipment, you'll be around that level, you know what I mean. But I'm just taking it now so I don't forget. That's what you get when I do these videos unscripted. I have to do shit so I don't forget. Anyways, next up at level 5, we're going to be getting extra attack, which is awesome, but we're also going to be getting Stunning Strike. Now, okay, look. There's two opinions rolling around about Stunning Strike in both D&D and BG3. It's the greatest feature Monk gets, it's the worst feature Monk gets, so I'm not going to comment on it. It costs a key point and can possibly stun your target. There we go. We're also going to get Cloak of Shadows. Wrap yourself in shadows to become invisible if you are obscured. Invisibility is going to be quite important to this build, so this is a nice feature to have, although we will get another source of it later, as I said. And I forgot to mention it earlier, but we are getting a bunch of racial features here. At level 5, we get a usage of Misty Step, which is nice. It's only once per long rest, but who cares? But we also get things like Enhanced Sleep and Mage Hand, which is cool. At Monk level 6, we're going to be getting some important Shadow Monk features. Key Empowered Strikes allowing us, well, this is not a Shadow Monk feature, but you get the point. Key Empowered Strikes allow us to overcome resistance and immunity to non-magical damage with our unarmed strikes. Lovely, we already know it. And also, Shadow Step, allowing us to teleport from shadow to shadow and give us advantage on our next attack roll when we do so. This is a bonus action, and getting advantage on our attack rolls is super important, and that extra mobility is quite nice. We get Misty Step and Shadow Step, we get it all. Now, you may be thinking, well, if we took Open Hand Monk at this level, we'd get the ability to imbue our unarmed strikes with psychic damage. And yes, you're right, and there's nothing wrong with taking Open Hand for this build. In fact, it would do quite nicely, but I really want to get a very late Shadow Monk ability, and you will see why. But we're still getting a seriously nice kit up until this point. Shadow Monk is still great, even if Open Hand is usually stronger. At Monk level 7, we're going to be getting the usual Monk stuff. We're going to be getting Evasion, allowing us to take no damage on a successful dex save, and half damage if we don't. and also Stillness of Mind, allowing us to immediately cure Charmed or Frightened, which fits perfectly with a build like this. We have strong control over our mind. Sometimes. Sometimes it makes us kill things, including people we love. That got very dark. But it's a Dark Urge. It's literally in the name. Right, at level 8 we're going to be getting another feat, and at this point, ability score improvement. And you really do have a choice here. We are using a piece of equipment that is going to bump up our dex by 2, so technically at this point we've had 18 for a while. So if you bump this up now, you'd go up to 20. Constitution if you want those better saving throws, and Wisdom if you want better unarmored defense. It's entirely up to you, so you kind of have to pick and choose here. I'm going to go with Dexterity for now because I'd quite like that maxed out. At Monk level 9, we're going to be getting Advanced Unarmored Movement. Yep, that's right, meaning that Difficult Terrain no longer affects us, and we can jump an additional 6 meters, which is pretty good. Now we have even more maneuverability. Next up, at Monk level 10, we're going to be getting, what is this one? Purity of Body, making us immune to poison damage and can't be poisoned or affected by disease, thanks to Ki and shit. Pretty good. We're also getting more unarmored movement, which means you're going to be fucking zooming. I've got high energy today. Right, next up at Monk level 11, this is the big ticket item that we really wanted with this build. This is Shadow Strike. In addition, you can use this unarmed or with your weapon. It puts an extra 3d8 psychic damage on an attack, and you teleport to a foe from a hidden position, so you have to be invisible or sneaking for this to work, which is why invisibility is so important, striking them with a creeping psychic ferocity from the shadows themselves. It costs 3 key points, so it's a little bit resource heavy, but it is absolutely worth it. It is super badass to use this. It's going to add a ton of psychic damage, and it's going to be really powerful. And finally, at Monk level 12, we're going to be grabbing another feat, which means we can grab an ability score improvement and again bump up whatever we like. It's entirely up to you. I might bump up my Constitution, because like I said, we have 20 Dexterity thanks to our equipment, and Constitution is still really important, whereas Wisdom is less so. Yes, our AC is going to take a bit of a hit here, but as long as we have a high enough Constitution, we should be fine in that regard. But we'll get into some ways we can kind of get around this kind of multi-ability score dependence in the late game when we get to the equipment section. Never mind, don't worry Gale, we'll get to you in a minute. So, that is the build. Now, what you get out of this is obviously just, you're playing a pretty standard monk setup here. You're getting Flurry of Blows, but you're also getting, you know, the ability to teleport, you're getting the ability to cast Darkness, you're getting that big Psychic Strike damage, which is going to be seriously awesome to use. And also, obviously, the ability to teleport, you're getting a ton of, you know, maneuverability, you're going to be able to get around the map really well. And again, thanks to the fact that we are a Githyanki, we're also getting things like Astral Knowledge for proficiency, allowing us to be a really solid party face, and things like Enhanced Sleep and Misty Step to be able to get around the overworld. So, you have a ton of good stuff here. But where this build is really going to fall into place is the equipment, so let's get into it. Why does that cannot not be cast? Oh, because I haven't taken a short rest. Whoopsie. There we go. This is why I want to get into this first. We are using Shadow Blade for this build. This is a Shadow Blade build. We kind of decided that this would be a good idea because, again, Illithid Powers don't use concentration. We are playing a purely martial character. And Shadow Blade is a big psychic mind sword thing. It's freaking awesome. It's exactly what we're looking for with a build like this. So let's cast the spell. This is going to give us Shadow Blade, allowing us to do 2d8 plus 5 psychic damage, plus an additional 1d4 psychic damage, which I'll get into in a minute. But of course, using this with Shadow Strike means we get a lot of psychic damage. It's the perfect weapon for a build like this, but we're also going to be using this with the Render of Mind and Body. When the wielder attacks with advantage, which, because we have invisibility and all that sort of thing, they deal an extra 1d8 psychic damage, meaning we're doing even more psychic damage, which is insane. This is just crazy. We're doing a massive amounts of psychic damage per turn, so this is quite the power build. Now obviously Shadowblade comes with the fact that you have to maintain concentration on it, which is why I was going for things like Warcaster and a high constitution stat, and eventually constitution saving for proficiency, but we'll get to that in a minute. So let's keep going, let's get into the bulk of the equipment now. Here we have the Diadem of Arcane Synergy. Whenever you inflict a condition, you gain Arcane Synergy for 2 rounds. Now, a lot of the Illithid Powers actually inflict conditions, so we can get it that way, but we also have other pieces of equipment that are going to allow us to get Arcane Synergy as well. And Arcane Synergy is going to allow us to add our Wisdom modifier, because that's our spellcasting ability modifier, to the damage of our weapon, which is going to give us, well, even more psychic damage overall, which is something we seriously want. We're pretty much always going to have Arcane Synergy up, so this is a nice piece of kit for the build. The big one though, again, the main reason we went Dark Urge, is the Deathstalker Mantle. Whenever we kill an enemy, we shroud ourselves in primeval darkness and become invisible, and invisible means we get advantage on our next attack, so that's big for this build, getting that extra psychic damage in. We have the Graceful Cloth. You gain Cat's Grace and increase your Dexterity score by 2 to a maximum of 20. We also gain a +1 bonus to Dex saving throws, and also increase our jump distance by 1.5 meters. This is basically just here to make us a lockpicking god, but also to allow us to put more points into other things instead of just dexterity, especially since one of our level ups is taken up by the Warcaster feat. So this just helps round out our stats, and it's you know, it's clothing, so it works with our unarmored defense anyway. And usually I'm not a fan of this look, but I think with this color, which everything is colored in indigo dye by the way, I think it works quite nicely for a kind of Mind Flayer build. This chest piece kind of reminds me of my Mind Flayers, not entirely sure why. Now here we have the Brain Drain Gloves. When you deal psychic damage, you also inflict mental fatigue for 2 turns. Now, basically what mental fatigue does is the affected entity has a -1 penalty to wisdom, intelligence, and charisma saving throws per turn remaining, so works pretty good. When it fails a wisdom, intelligence, or charisma saving throw while having 5 or more turns of this condition remaining, they take 1d4 psychic damage. So it's extra psychic damage whenever they fail one of those mental saving throws, but it's mainly here to kind of help trigger Arcane Synergy from the Diadem a bit more easily, so you can swap this out for something like the Gloves of Dexterity if you wanted, but it's entirely up to you. And then finally we have the Boots of Uninhibited Kashigo. This was kind of just like the community's decision, as we were kind of deliberating back and forth on what boots would work nicely for this build. It allows us to add our Wisdom modifier to our unarmed strikes, which just makes them a bit more powerful, but something like the Boots of Speed could be useful, or the Disintegrating Nightwalkers, or anything like that. Maybe even the Dark Justicia boots if you go full evil with this route, but those are medium armor, so yeah, you'll kind of have to gauge what you want to do with this build, but this was just a solid option. This is an Act 3 option though, so something like the Boots of Speed would work nicely in the meantime. As for our accessories, we have the Sentient Amulet. This is my go-to for monk builds, and it's easy to see why. You get Shatter, which is just there for fun, but the main thing is Key Restoration, allowing you to restore a number of key points equal to your martial arts die. Basically just means that you're going to get extra resources, and this build is kind of key point heavy since Shadow Strike costs so much, so having the ability to get a bit of key points back is pretty good. And finally we have the Strange Conduit Ring. Since we're always going to be concentrating on Shadow Blade, this will always be up. While concentrating on a spell, the wearer's weapon attacks deal an additional 1d4 psychic damage, so we're just getting more psychic damage overall. Now, there is one thing I'm going to suggest. You get the Sentient Amulet, or at least a lesser version of it in Act 1, and then you follow its questline up until Act 3 to get this superior version. But when you're in Act 3, you could actually swap this out for the Amulet of Greater Health, which you can get right at the start of Act 3 if you know what you're doing. I won't spoil anything, but those who know, know. Now, this amulet is perfect for this build. It sets our constitution to 23, meaning that our concentration saving throws are going to be insane, especially since this amulet also gives us advantage on those saving throws. This would also mean we completely dump constitution and put all of our points into dexterity and wisdom, giving us way more freedom overall. Once you get into Act 3, this is what you want to grab, most likely, unless you find that having those extra key points is more valuable. Personally, I think this is more valuable, because if you put this on, you can put more points into wisdom, making all of this a lot stronger. So I would personally recommend swapping to this in the end game when you get there, because if you have the Amulet of Greater Health equipped, we no longer need the Warcaster feat. That gives you an extra feat for maybe if you wanted to go with Tavern Brawler and drink Colossus elixirs, Or if you wanted to put some points into strength and just use Tavern Brawler that way. Or go for something else, or just like an extra ability score improvement to round out your other stats. This would give you a ton of freedom, but obviously not available until Act 3, so this is a good option that you can pick up in Act 1, and has a fun questline attached to it, like I said anyway. And then you might want to swap this out for this. You might want to swap out the Sentient Amulet when you get the Greater Health Amulet. So, I believe that's everything as far as the equipment is concerned, but we're not quite done yet. I said we were going to be able to get Constitution saving throw proficiency somehow with this build, and that is why I have Gale. Gale is a level 6 transmutation wizard, which means he gets the ability to use Transmuter's Stone, allowing you to store some of your transmutation magic in a small stone, and a creature carrying the stone gains a benefit of your choice. This does not have to be exclusive to the person who made it. Using Transmuter's Stone, we can cast, let's see, here we are, Transmuter's Stone, Constitution. Create a stone that grants the carrier proficiency in Constitution saving throws. This lasts until a long rest, so we cast this. And with that, we now have it in our inventory. We give that to our main character. And voila, we now have Constitution saving throw proficiency, I believe. Yes, there we go. Giving us a +8 con rolls with our current stats. As I said, this will go up even more to a +10 with the amulet. And again, we have advantage on all those concentration saving throw checks, so you're going to get a ton out of this. But then, finally, the main crux of this build, the Illithid Powers. Now, I have pretty much all of the Illithid Powers that can be obtained right here in front of me, but I will go over the ones that are relevant to this build. First up, we have Concentrated Blast. This is a big damage psychic spell that requires us to be concentrating on another spell to cast it. So, if we feel like we don't need Shadow Blade anymore for whatever reason, you can grab this. But you kind of need to get another couple of spells to be able to access this, and I have links to everything in the description for those of you who need the kind of overall progression. Feel free to check the wiki, but this is a big one. Another big one is Mind Blast, which is just a big, ranged magic damage blast that could potentially stun an enemy. We also have Stage Fright, causing our targets to have disadvantage on attack rolls and take 2d6 psychic damage each time they miss. Yes, I did the math right. We also have Psionic Overload, allowing us to deal an extra 1d4 psychic damage per turn, with the caveat that we take 1d4 psychic damage ourselves every turn. And yes, this psychic damage can break our concentration, but our concentration is basically solid stone at this point, so it doesn't really matter. But obviously, and then I quite also like having Displace a Beast Sheep as basically a way to tank a bit more as a frontline fighter. We also have... Where is the other one that I really cared about? Sorry, I don't really use Illithid Powers in my builds very often, so bear with me. I mean, obviously, Free Cast and Mind Sanctuary are both quite powerful, as is Fly, and you definitely want to go down the route of getting every single possible Illithid power in this build, but the main ones to focus on are things like Psychic Overload, Stage Fright, Concentrated Blast, and Mind Blast. Absolutely. But again, I have links in the description that go in detail more. Now, there is one final thing that I can talk about here. Unfortunately, due to the fact that there is no mod that lets me add this to my inventory, I'll have to maybe ask someone to help me with that. There is an item called the Resonance Stone. Now, you can get this in Act 2, and basically what this does is, while it's in your inventory, you get this aura, and anybody who is close to you becomes vulnerable to psychic damage. However, it comes with a caveat. You also become vulnerable to psychic damage, which means you have to be a bit careful if you're up against Mind Flayer type enemies, for example, and it also will give you some of your saving throws a hit. I'll have an infographic on screen, like I said, to basically give you the rundown on everything that this thing does, but of course getting the Resonance Stone would mean you would be immensely more powerful. I mean, I'm going to assume that I have the combat footage kind of playing already, and so basically you can see all the psychic damage that I'm doing. Anything that is a pinkish purple number is psychic damage. And if you think about that, if we had the Resonance Stone in this combat footage, all of those damage numbers would be doubled. That is insane. You think about all the potential psychic damage I've showcased in this video, that becomes doubled. Again, it comes with risks, but this build I think is powerful enough that the risks are well worth the benefits. So overall, and we're also in this combat footage, we're missing the Transmuter Stone. I didn't really have a way to add it, or at the very least I forgot to, so you're not quite seeing this build at its full potential in the combat showcase, but you can still see that despite that, it does a hell of a lot. And besides, it's just fun. The way the Illithid Powers interact with Shadow Monk is just great. I think this is a really fun build, and the fact that the community was able to come up with it alongside myself just makes it even nicer. As for end of video stuff, there's nothing really too new to add. I mean, again, the support on the channel has been insane at the moment. You know, I mean, that wolf pack video I uploaded the other day did surprisingly well. That was really funny. The bearded build is also out, which has kind of been a channel meme, and like it has finally come full circle. And I guess you could also consider this my updated Shadowblade build. I think I'm going to label that old Shadowblade build as outdated, because now that I've found ways to really make it work that I wasn't privy to really at the time of making that original video, I think I'm going to label that video as outdated. I'll change the title and have this be my new main Shadowblade build, because I think this one works immensely well. Anyways, I don't think there's anything else left to discuss, so I'm going to leave it here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time.
Fall by my hand.
Come a little closer.
Take this shield, or Dario will have your head.